King Velker sat on his throne of crystallized starlight. The throne gleamed and sparkled in the dim light of his flagship. Around him stood members of his court, dressed in fine robes. They waited in silence for their king to speak. Velker was old, very old. He had ruled the Valthorn Empire for over 300 years. His face showed no kindness. His eyes were cold and hard. Commander Thrain stood at attention before the throne. He was a loyal soldier who had served the Empire his whole life. He wore his military uniform with pride. The medals on his chest showed his many years of service. But today, something felt different. The commander could sense that the king was planning something. Velker began to speak. His voice was smooth but cruel. He talked about humanity, the newest species to join the Galactic Council. The humans had made contact with alien civilizations 15 years ago. Since then, they had been trying to prove themselves worthy. But many species, including the Valthorn, looked down on them. The king called humans soft-hearted primitives. He said they valued feelings over strength. He said they were weak because they cared too much about small things. The court members nodded in agreement. They had learned long ago not to disagree with King Velker. Then Velker revealed his plan. A smile appeared on his face, but it was not a kind smile. He would send the humans a test, he said. A test they would surely fail. Commander Thrain listened carefully as the king explained. There was a young dragon named Rika. She had been injured in one of the Empire's mining operations. The accident had been terrible. Rika's wings were shattered. Bones stuck out through the delicate membrane. She had internal bleeding and many broken bones. The injury was the Empire's fault. The mine had not been built safely. But Velker did not want anyone to know this. Dragons were sacred to the Valthorn people. They were worshipped as divine beings. But Velker did not truly care about Rika. He only cared about his reputation. He decided to send Rika to Earth, to a simple animal clinic, not to the best human hospital, not to their most advanced medical center. No, he would send her to a small veterinary clinic in Seoul, South Korea. The king explained his reasoning. When the humans failed to save Rika, as they surely would, he could use it as proof that humans were unworthy, proof that they did not deserve to be in the Galactic Council. It was a perfect plan, Velker thought, a cruel joke that would serve his purposes well. Commander Thrain felt uneasy. Something about this plan troubled him, but he was a soldier. He followed orders. He bowed to his king and left to make the arrangements. Meanwhile, on Earth, Dr. Jaiwin was having a normal day at her clinic. She was 32 years old and had run the clinic for 5 years. It was a small place, tucked away on a quiet street in Seoul. The clinic was clean and bright, filled with cages and medical equipment. The walls were covered with photos of animals she had treated over the years. Jaiwin was treating a rescued cat. The cat had been found in an alley, sick and scared. Now it purred softly as Jaiwin gently examined it. She spoke to the cat in a soft voice, telling it everything would be okay. This was what Jaiwin did best. She cared for creatures that others might ignore. Jaiwin had lost her younger brother when she was 20. He had died from a rare disease. The doctors had given up too soon, she thought. They had said there was nothing they could do, but Jaiwin had never forgotten the feeling of helplessness. She had promised herself that she would never give up on a life she could save. Every animal that came through her door mattered to her. Miho, her assistant, worked at the desk. He was 28 years old and had known Jaiwin since childhood. They had grown up in the same neighborhood. Miho was practical and careful. He often worried that Jaiwin took too many risks, but he admired her dedication. He had studied xenobiology when aliens first made contact with Earth. He had hoped to work with alien life forms. Instead, he had ended up here, helping Jaiwin with cats and dogs. He did not mind. Working with his friend made him happy. Hyuna, the young intern, was organizing medical supplies. She was 25 and full of energy. She looked up to Jaiwin like a hero. Hyuna was idealistic and brave. She believed that anyone could make a difference if they tried hard enough. Working at this clinic was her dream come true. The door suddenly burst open. Miho stumbled in, his face pale. His hands were shaking. Jaiwin looked up from the cat, concerned. She had never seen Miho look so scared. "Outside," Miho said. Look outside. Jaiwan and Huna rushed to the window. What they saw made them freeze in shock. An enormous alien spacecraft had landed in the street. It was huge, taking up the entire road. The ship was made of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols glowed on its surface. News drones already circled overhead. Their cameras pointed at the clinic. Armored guards emerged from the ship. They wore heavy armor that made them look even more intimidating. They carried a large containment pod between them. The pod was made of some kind of translucent material. Jaiwan could see something moving inside it. Something large. A car pulled up quickly. Ambassador Taejin got out. He was 55 years old and had been Earth's diplomat to the Galactic Council for 10 years. His job had made him tired. He had spent years trying to help humanity fit in with the other alien species. His face showed the stress of his work. But today, he looked more worried than usual. Taejin entered the clinic. He was breathing hard, like he had been running. Jaiwan, he said, they are here for you. The Valthorn Empire has sent you a patient. Jaiwan stared at him, confused. A patient? What kind of patient needed armored guards in a spaceship? Taejin explained quickly. The Valthorn had formally requested that Jaiwan treat an injured dragon. It was phrased as an honor, he said, but his expression told a different story. He had seen the medical reports. The dragon's injuries were catastrophic. Multiple fractures, internal bleeding, severe trauma. It was a death sentence, and everyone knew it. Why me? Jaiwan asked. Why this clinic? Taejin shook his head. He did not know, or maybe he did not want to say. The truth was too cruel. The Valthorn expected her to fail. They expected the dragon to die. And when it did, they would use it against all of humanity. Jaiwan walked to the window. She could see the containment pod more clearly now. Through the translucent material, she glimpsed scales. They were the color of a twilight sky, shifting between purple and blue, beautiful even from a distance. She made her decision in that moment. She would try, not because of politics, not to prove anything to the galaxy, but because there was a living creature in pain, and she could not turn away. The guards brought the containment pod inside. They had to remove the front door frame to fit it through. The clinic suddenly felt very small. Miho and Huna helped guide the pod to the largest room they had. It was usually used for treating horses and large dogs, but it had never held anything like this. The guards opened the pod carefully, and then Jaiwan saw Rika fully for the first time. The dragon was about the size of a large horse. Her scales shimmered in the light, changing colors as she breathed. She was beautiful despite her terrible injuries. Her wings were spread out, but they were shattered. Bones protruded through the delicate membrane. Blood stained her scales. Her breathing was labored and painful. Each breath seemed to hurt her. But it was Rika's eyes that struck Jaiwan the most. They were ancient and intelligent. They were clouded with pain, but there was awareness there, understanding. The dragon knew she was dying. She knew this was probably her end. But there was also a tiny spark of hope in those eyes. For a moment, Jaiwan felt the weight of the impossible task before her. Miho stood beside her, looking at the extent of the injuries. He quietly suggested that maybe they should just make the dragon comfortable. Let her pass with dignity. It would be kinder than struggling against impossible odds. Huna's eyes filled with tears. She looked ready to cry. But Jaiwan stepped forward. She reached out slowly and gently placed her hand on Rika's scales. They were warm to the touch, warmer than she expected. The dragon's large eye focused on her. In that moment, something passed between them. It was not words. It was deeper than that. It was an understanding, a plea, a desperate hope that someone, anyone, might care enough to try. Jaiwan leaned close to the dragon's head. She whispered, soft enough that only Rika could hear. I will not give up on you. I promise. The dragon's eye seemed to brighten just a little. It was a small change, but Jaiwan saw it. Rika understood, and somehow, impossibly, she still had hope. Outside, news drones broadcast everything to the galaxy. In the Galactic Council chambers, beings from 100 different worlds watched. Some were curious. Some felt pity. Others watched with cruel anticipation, waiting for the humans to fail. On his flagship, King Velker watched too. He sat on his throne of starlight, a slight smile on his ancient face. The trap was set perfectly. Now he would wait for the inevitable failure. The humans would try their best, he thought. They would struggle and work in care. And then the dragon would die anyway. And he would have his proof that humanity was too weak, too soft, to belong among the stars. But in that small clinic in Seoul, Jaiwan was already working. She and her team started with the basics. Stop the bleeding. Manage the pain. Make sure Rika could breathe. Miho adapted equipment that was meant for horses. Hyuna monitored vital signs, learning as she went. The night was just beginning, and they had so much work to do. Jaiwan looked at Rika and felt determination fill her chest. She had made a promise. She would keep it, no matter how impossible it seemed. No matter what the galaxy expected. She would give this dragon every chance to survive, because that was what you did when a life was placed in your hands. You fought for it with everything you had. The galaxy was watching. King Velka was waiting. But none of that mattered to Jaiwan. All that mattered was a beautiful, broken dragon lying before her, and the promise she had whispered. A promise of hope. A promise of mercy. A promise that she would never, ever give up. 3 days had passed since Rika arrived at the clinic. The world outside had changed. News crews camped on the street day and night. People gathered behind barriers, watching and waiting. Some held signs supporting Jaiwan. Others demanded that she give up and stop wasting time. The pressure was enormous. Inside the clinic, time seemed to move differently. Jaiwan had barely slept. Her eyes were red and tired. She survived on coffee and determination. Miho looked exhausted too. Hyuna had dark circles under her eyes. But none of them complained. They were too focused on keeping Rika alive. Against all predictions, Rika was still breathing. The dragon should have died on the first night. Every medical expert who looked at her scans said it was impossible for her to survive. But she was still here, still fighting. Her breathing was steadier now. The bleeding had stopped. Small victories, but important ones. Hyuna was checking Rika's vital signs when she noticed something strange. She had been comparing the dragon's biology to the information in the galactic medical databases. The databases contained information about thousands of alien species. But something about Rika's cells was different. They did not match the pattern she expected to see. Hyuna called Jaiwan and Miho over. "Look at this," she said, pointing at her screen. "The dragon's cellular structure is regenerative. Her cells want to heal themselves, but they need specific conditions. Without those conditions, the healing process stops." Jaiwan leaned closer, studying the data. This was important. This could change everything. Miho pulled up more information. Despite worshipping dragons as sacred beings, the Valthorn had never really studied them. They treated dragons like holy relics, not like living creatures with complex biology. No one had bothered to understand how dragon bodies actually worked. This ignorance had cost Rika dearly. Jaiwan realized something important. Rika's body wanted to heal. It was designed to heal. But the sterile, cold environment of a typical hospital was wrong for her. Dragons needed something else. Something warmer. Something more natural. Something that felt like care, not just medical treatment. Working together, the team created a new treatment plan. They could not use the advanced alien technology that the galaxy might have used. They did not have access to that. But they had something else. They had knowledge of Earth's natural healing techniques. They had patience. They had genuine care. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. They adjusted the room temperature. They added humidity to the air. They changed the lighting to mimic natural sunlight. Jaiwan made sure someone was always with Rika, talking to her, touching her gently. Dragons were intelligent and social. She reasoned. Maybe loneliness was hurting the healing process just as much as the physical injuries. The changes worked. Within hours, Rika's vital signs improved noticeably. Her breathing became easier. The inflammation around her wounds decreased. It was slow progress, but it was real progress. Hope began to grow in the small clinic. Then something unexpected happened. Jaiwan was sitting beside Rika late one night, gently cleaning the dragon's scales. Suddenly, she felt something in her mind. It was not a sound. It was not words. It was more like a feeling, an emotion that was not her own. Sadness, pain, but also gratitude and hope. Jaiwan gasped and pulled back. Rika's eye opened, focusing on her. The dragon was trying to communicate. Telepathy, Jaiwan realized. Dragons were telepathic. She had read about this in the files Ambassador Teijin had given her, but seeing it written down was different from experiencing it. The contact was painful for Rika. Jaiwan could sense that. Using telepathy in her weakened state took enormous effort. But the dragon was desperate to connect, desperate to communicate. Slowly, carefully, images began to form in Jaiwan's mind. They were fragmentary at first, unclear, but gradually they became clearer. Jaiwan saw mine, dark tunnels stretching deep into a mountain. She saw small alien workers digging, exhausted and scared. She saw Rika there, young and strong, her wings spread wide. The dragon was protecting the workers, Jaiwan realized, trying to shield them from danger. Then came the collapse. The ceiling of the mine gave way, rocks and debris falling, the workers screaming. Rika tried to cover them with her body and wings. The weight of the rocks crushed her wings, shattered the bones, tore the membrane. She saved the workers, but the cost was terrible. The vision shifted. Jaiwan saw King Velker being told about the accident. She saw his cold expression. He was not concerned about Rika. He was not concerned about the workers. He was only worried about his reputation. The collapse had been caused by the Empire's negligence. They had not built the mine safely. They had cut corners to save money. Velker made his decision quickly. He would send Rika to Earth. If she died there, he could blame the humans. If she somehow survived, he could claim credit for choosing the right healers. Either way, the Empire's fault would be hidden. It was cruel and calculated. Rika was not being honored. She was being disposed of. The telepathic connection faded. Jaiwan found tears running down her face. Rika had been a hero. She had sacrificed herself to save others, and her reward had been abandonment and cruelty. The injustice of it made Jaiwan angry, but the anger strengthened her resolve. Rika deserved better. She deserved a chance. The telepathic bond worked both ways. Rika saw into Jaiwan's mind, too. She saw the memory of a young boy, sick in a hospital bed, Jaiwan's brother. She saw Jaiwan holding his hand, watching him fade away. She saw the doctors who had given up too soon. She felt Jaiwan's grief and her determination that came from that grief, the determination to save every life she could. For Rika, this was something entirely new. The Valthorn people worshipped dragons, but they did not really care about them. They bowed and prayed, but there was no warmth in it, no genuine connection. But Jaiwan cared, really cared, not because Rika was sacred, not because of politics or religion, but simply because Rika was a living being who needed help. This realization changed something in Rika. For the first time since the accident, she felt truly hopeful. Maybe she could heal. Maybe she could fly again. Maybe this human, this small, brave creature, could do what the entire Valthorn Empire could not. News of Rika's survival spread quickly across the galaxy. What was supposed to be a brief demonstration of human failure had become an ongoing story. Beings from hundreds of worlds tuned in to watch. The dragon was still alive after 3 days. How was this possible? Some aliens began to wonder if they had underestimated humanity. Elder Nero of the Galactic Council was one of those watching closely. She was ancient, even by galactic standards. She had observed countless civilizations over thousands of years. She had seen empires rise and fall, and she was beginning to ask questions. Why had the Valthorn sent such a critically injured sacred creature to a primitive medical facility? It made no sense, unless there was something else going on. King Velker was growing irritated. His plan was not working the way he expected. The dragon should be dead by now. Instead, she was improving. The humans were succeeding where they should have failed. This was unacceptable. He needed to regain control of the situation. Velker summoned Commander Thrain. The commander stood at attention, waiting for orders. The king told him to go to Earth. He was to observe the treatment personally. He was to find fault with the humans' methods. Surely they were doing something wrong. Surely there was some mistake he could point to. Thrain bowed and accepted the mission, though something in his expression showed doubt. Thrain arrived at the clinic 2 days later. He expected to find chaos. He expected incompetence. He expected a dying dragon and desperate humans trying to cover their failures. Instead, he found something completely different. The clinic was organized and calm. Jaiwin and her team moved with quiet efficiency. They worked long hours without complaint. They treated Rika with genuine care and attention. Thrain watched as Jaiwin spent an entire night beside the dragon, monitoring her breathing, adjusting her position to ease her pain, speaking to her in soft, reassuring tones. This was not what Thrain had expected. These humans were not trying to win political points. They were not trying to prove their worth to the galaxy. They simply cared, genuinely cared. It fascinated him. He had served the Empire for 300 years, and he had never seen anything quite like this. But then disaster struck. On the 8th day since Rika's arrival, her condition suddenly worsened. She developed a severe infection. Her temperature spiked. Her breathing became labored again. The progress they had made seemed to vanish overnight. Jaiwin's face went pale as she read the diagnostic results. Miho ran more tests. The results were bad. Rika's immune system, weakened by trauma and struggling in Earth's environment, was failing. Her body could not fight the infection on its own. They had 48 hours, maybe less, before the infection became fatal. If they did not act fast, all their work would be for nothing. Rika would die. Jaiwin faced an impossible choice. The conventional treatment would be to use the strongest antibiotics available, hit the infection hard and fast. But Miho's analysis showed a problem. The strong antibiotics could destroy the delicate regenerative process they had started in Rika's cells. They might kill the infection, but ruin any chance of her wings healing properly. The alternative was risky, very risky. They could use Earth's natural antibodies, combined with a technique Jaiwin had only used on smaller animals. It was gentler, but there was no guarantee it would work fast enough. If it failed, Rika would die, and the blame would fall entirely on Jaiwin's shoulders. Ambassador Teijin urged caution. Failure now would be catastrophic for Earth's standing in the galactic community. Use the proven method. He begged, do not take unnecessary risks. Commander Thrain stood in the corner, watching with an unreadable expression. Outside, the news drones waited. The galaxy held its breath. Jaiwin stood beside Rika. She placed her hand on those iridescent scales. Through their telepathic bond, she felt the dragon's fear and pain, but she also felt trust. Rika trusted her to make the right choice. That trust meant everything. Jaiwin made her decision. She would take the risk. She would use the gentler treatment. Because saving Rika's life was not enough. She wanted to give Rika back her wings. She wanted to see the dragon fly again. That was worth the risk. That was worth everything. She looked at her team. Miho nodded, trusting her judgment despite his fears. Hyuna stepped forward, ready to help, and so they began, the most critical 48 hours of their lives. The battle to save not just a dragon's life, but her future. The galaxy was watching, but Jaiwin only saw Rika, and she whispered another promise. I will not give up. We will get through this together. The clinic became a battleground. For 36 hours straight, Jaiwin and her team fought to save Rika's life. They administered the experimental treatment carefully. Every dose had to be perfect. Every moment counted. The dragon's fever climbed higher and higher. Her temperature reached dangerous levels. Jaiwin refused to leave Rika's side. Her eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. Her hands shook from exhaustion and too much coffee. But she kept working. Miho and Hyuna took turns resting, but Jaiwin would not stop. She monitored every vital sign. She adjusted the treatment when needed. She whispered encouragement to the semi-conscious dragon. Commander Thrain watched everything. He stood in the corner of the room, silent and observant. This was not what he had expected to find on Earth. He had expected incompetence. He had expected humans who were in over their heads. Instead, he saw a dedication that bordered on obsession. He saw a genuine love for a creature they had only known for a few days. On the 20th hour, Rika's breathing became erratic. Her heart rate spiked dangerously. Alarms blared from the monitoring equipment. Hyuna gasped in fear. Miho rushed to check the readings. For a terrible moment, They thought they were losing her. Jaiwin placed both hands on Rika's chest, feeling the labored heartbeat beneath the scales. "Hold on," she whispered. "Please hold on." The crisis passed. Rika's heartbeat steadied. Her breathing calmed. But it had been close. Too close. Thrain found himself releasing a breath he had not realized he was holding. He was supposed to be an impartial observer, but he discovered he wanted the dragon to survive. He wanted these humans to succeed. The same thing happened again on the 32nd hour. Another crisis. Another moment where death seemed certain. And again, Jaiwin refused to give up. She adjusted the treatment. She stayed calm when everyone else panicked. She talked to Rika through their telepathic bond, giving the dragon something to hold on to, a reason to keep fighting. Finally, on the 37th hour, something changed. Rika's fever broke. The temperature dropped steadily. Her breathing became easier. The infection was losing. The treatment was working. Hyuna burst into tears of relief and joy. Mio allowed himself a small smile, his first in days. Jaiwin simply leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Through the telepathic bond, Rika's voice came through. It was stronger now than it had been in days. "Thank you," just those 2 words. But they meant everything. Jaiwin opened her eyes and looked at the dragon. Rika's eyes were clear and focused. The worst was over. They had won this battle. That evening, Thrain made an encrypted transmission to King Velker. He reported that Rika had survived the infection. He described the treatment that had saved her. He tried to keep his voice neutral and professional. But even through the transmission, Velker could sense something had changed in his commander. Velker's response was immediate and filled with cold fury. This was not acceptable. The dragon should be dead. The humans should have failed. That was the entire point. He ordered Thrain to find evidence of negligence or malpractice. There had to be something wrong with the humans' methods. Surely they had made mistakes. "Find them," the king commanded, but Thrain hesitated. For the first time in 300 years of loyal service, he questioned an order. He had watched Jaiwin work for days. He had seen her dedication. He had seen her sit with Rika through the long nights, not because she had to, but because she could not bear to let the dragon face fear alone. He had seen Hyuna cry tears of joy when Rika improved. He had seen Miho sacrifice sleep to research dragon biology with tireless devotion. There was no negligence here. There was no malpractice. There was only compassion. Pure, genuine compassion. And it was working better than anything the Empire's advanced hospitals could have done. This realization troubled Thrain deeply. What did it say about the Valthorn Empire that these primitive humans could succeed whereas people would have failed? One night, unable to sleep, Thrain found Jaiwin in the clinic's small kitchen. She was making tea, moving slowly with exhaustion. He asked her a question that had been bothering him. "Why do you care so much? Rika is not your species. She is not even from your world. You owe her nothing, yet you risked everything for her. Why?" Jaiwin was quiet for a moment. Then she told him about her brother, about the disease that took him, about the doctors who gave up when they should have kept trying. She told him about the promise she made to herself. She would never give up on a life she could save. Every creature deserved someone who would fight for them. It did not matter if they were a cat, a dog, or a dragon. A life was a life. Thrain listened in silence. When she finished, he felt something shift inside him, a crack in the foundation of everything he believed. The Empire taught that compassion was weakness, that mercy was foolish, that only the strong deserved to survive. But here was this small human proving all that wrong. She was not weak. Her compassion made her stronger than any warrior he had ever known. He realized with growing horror what the Empire had become. They had forgotten something fundamental, something these humans still remembered. They had forgotten how to care. They had forgotten that true strength came not from power or cruelty, but from the courage to show mercy. Days passed. Rika grew stronger. Her wounds were healing properly now. The regenerative process was working. Slowly but surely, her body was repairing itself. Her wings were still badly damaged, but there were signs of improvement. New membrane tissue was growing. Bones were knitting back together. It would take time, but there was real hope now. As Rika's strength returned, so did her telepathic abilities. She could communicate clearly now, not just emotions and images, but actual thoughts and words. And she chose to speak a truth that could shatter the Empire, a truth that Commander Thrain would witness, a truth that the ever-present news drones would record and broadcast to the galaxy. One morning, with Thrain and the news crews watching, Rika shared her story. She opened her mind and projected images for everyone to see. She showed the galaxy what had really happened: the mining disaster, the unsafe conditions, the collapsing ceiling, her desperate attempt to protect the workers, the crushing weight that destroyed her wings. She showed them King Velker's response, his cold calculation, his decision to hide the Empire's negligence by sending her to Earth. She revealed that this was never meant to be an honor. It was meant to be a death sentence. The humans were supposed to fail. The dragon was supposed to die. And the Empire's shame would be buried with her. The revelations caused an immediate uproar across the galaxy. News of the truth spread like wildfire. The Valthorn Empire, so proud and mighty, had lied. They had sacrificed one of their sacred dragons to hide their mistakes. They had used Earth as a dumping ground for their problems. The galactic community was outraged. Elder Nira called for an emergency session of the Galactic Council. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to debate what should be done. The evidence was clear. The Valthorn Empire had acted dishonorably, but they were also powerful. Many species feared what might happen if they challenged Velker II directly. King Velker watched the proceedings from his throne. His face showed no emotion, but inside he was furious. His careful plan had backfired catastrophically. These primitive humans had not only saved the dragon, they had turned her into a witness against him. He had underestimated them badly. But he was not finished yet. He still had power. He still had his fleet. Velker issued an ultimatum. The dragon must be returned to the Empire immediately for proper care. He claimed the humans had manipulated Rika. They had filled her mind with lies. They had turned a sacred creature against their own people. He demanded that Earth surrender Rika within 48 hours, or face the consequences. To emphasize his demand, Velker sent a fleet to Earth. 20 warships appeared in orbit around the planet. Their weapons were powered down, but the threat was clear. The Valthorn Empire had the military might to destroy Earth if they chose. This was not a request. It was an order backed by overwhelming force. Ambassador Teijin was beside himself with worry. Earth had no military capable of standing against a Valthorn fleet. Their defense forces were nothing compared to the Empire's warships. If Velker decided to attack, millions would die. The ambassador rushed to the clinic, begging Jaiwin to release Rika. "Please," he said, "we cannot fight them. We must give them what they want." But Jaiwin refused. Her voice was quiet but firm. "She is not a possession to be returned," Jaiwin said. "She is not property. She is a patient under my care, and she is not ready to be moved. Her wings are still healing. Moving her now could undo all our progress. I will not risk her recovery for politics." Teijin argued desperately. "This is not just about one dragon anymore. This is about the survival of humanity. Millions of lives are at stake. You must see reason." But Jaiwin stood her ground. "I made a promise," she said simply. "I will not break it." Rika heard this exchange through her telepathic link with Jaiwin. The dragon was moved beyond words. In all her years, no one had ever stood up for her like this. No one had ever valued her well-being over political convenience. The Valthorn people worshipped dragons, but they did not truly care about them. Jaiwin cared. Really, genuinely cared. Even when it meant risking everything. Rika made a decision. She reached out through her telepathic abilities to someone she never thought she would trust. Commander Thrain. The commander felt her presence in his mind. It was gentle, not invasive. She asked him a simple question. A question that would change everything. What kind of empire do you want to serve? The question echoed in Thrain's mind long after Rika's presence faded. He thought about the empire he had served for 3 centuries. He thought about King Velker's cruelty. He thought about the negligence that had nearly killed Rika. Then he thought about Jaiwin, refusing to abandon her patient even in the face of overwhelming danger. He thought about what true honor looked like. And he knew his answer. Outside the clinic, the world descended into chaos. Protests erupted in cities across Earth. Some demanded that Jaiwin surrender the dragon immediately. Others rallied to support her, forming human chains around the clinic. Governments scrambled to find a diplomatic solution, but time was running out. The Valthorn fleet waited in orbit. King Velker's deadline approached, and in that small clinic in Seoul, a veterinarian stood beside a dragon and refused to back down. The Valthorn fleet hung in Earth's orbit like a dark cloud. 20 warships, each one capable of destroying a city with a single blast. The people of Earth looked up at the night sky and saw their potential doom. Fear spread across the planet. Stock markets crashed. Governments called emergency meetings. Families huddled together, wondering if they would see tomorrow. King Velker himself was aboard the flagship. He had come personally to oversee the retrieval of his property. That was how he thought of Riken now. Not as a sacred being, not as a living creature, just as property that had been taken from him. His pride had been wounded, and he would have his revenge. The world watched and waited. News channels broadcast around the clock. Some called for Jaiwin to surrender Rika immediately. Protesters filled the streets, demanding that she save humanity by giving up the dragon. Others stood firm, declaring that Earth would not bow to threats. They gathered around the clinic, forming a protective circle. They held signs that read, "We stand with Jaiwin," and "A life is a life." Inside the clinic, Jaiwin continued her work as if nothing had changed. She checked Rika's vital signs. She changed bandages. She administered medication. Miho watched her with admiration and concern. "How can you be so calm?" he asked. "There are warships in orbit ready to destroy us." Jaiwin looked at him with tired eyes. "Because Rika needs me to be calm," she said simply. My fear would not help her heal. Rika's wings were healing, but they were not ready yet. The new membrane tissue was still fragile. The bones were not fully mended. She needed another week, maybe 2, before she could fly. Jaiwin knew they did not have that time, but she refused to rush the healing process. Rushing could cause permanent damage. It could mean Rika would never fly again, and that was unacceptable. Hyuna was terrified. She tried to hide it, but her hands shook when she worked. She kept looking out the window at the protesters and the news drones. "We could all die," she whispered to Miho, "because we would not give up one dragon. Is that right? Is that fair?" Miho put a hand on her shoulder. "Jaiwin taught us that every life matters. If we abandon that principle when it becomes difficult, then it never really mattered at all." Commander Thrain received a summons from King Velker. He was ordered to report to the flagship immediately. His heart was heavy as he left the clinic. He had a terrible feeling about what was coming. Jaiwin watched him go. Through her telepathic link, Rika whispered, "He is a good person. He will do what is right." Jaiwin hoped the dragon was correct. Thrain stood before King Velker in the grand throne room of the flagship. The king sat on his crystallized starlight throne, his face cold and hard. Velker demanded a full report. He wanted to hear that the humans had mistreated Rika. He wanted evidence of negligence. He wanted proof that would justify his actions. But Thrain could not give him what he wanted. For the first time in 300 years of loyal service, the commander told the truth that his king did not want to hear. He described what he had witnessed: the dedication, the care, the sleepless nights, the genuine compassion. He admitted that he had seen nothing in the Empire's hospitals to match what these humans had accomplished. He went further. He suggested carefully that perhaps the Empire had something to learn from Earth. Perhaps compassion was not weakness after all. Perhaps mercy was a strength they had forgotten. The throne room fell silent. The court members stared at Thrain in shock. No one spoke to the king this way. No one questioned his wisdom. Velker's response was immediate and brutal. He rose from his throne, his eyes blazing with fury. Thrain was stripped of his rank on the spot. His medals were torn from his uniform. He was declared a traitor to the Empire. Guards seized him and dragged him to the brig. He would be confined to quarters until the king decided his punishment. But Thrain's testimony had been broadcast to the entire fleet. Every ship had heard his words. Every crew member had listened to their respected commander speak truth to power. Seeds of doubt were planted. Soldiers who had served for decades began to question, was this really the empire they had pledged to serve? Was this the honor they had fought for? Meanwhile, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The great chamber was filled with representatives from hundreds of worlds. Beings of every shape and size gathered to debate the crisis. Holographic displays showed the Valthorn fleet surrounding Earth. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. King Velker attended via hologram. His image stood tall and imposing in the center of the chamber. He argued that this was an internal matter. The dragon was property of the Valthorn Empire. Earth had no right to interfere. By refusing to return Rika, the humans were violating galactic law. They deserved to be punished. Many species nodded in agreement. The Valthorn Empire was powerful. No one wanted to anger them. It was safer to side with Velker, to let Earth face the consequences alone. Some delegates argued that one dragon's life was not worth risking galactic peace. Others simply did not care what happened to humans. Then Ambassador Tajin stood to speak. He was exhausted and terrified, but he was also determined. He did not argue law or politics. He knew he would lose that debate. Instead, he did something different. He showed the council footage from the clinic. Real, unedited footage of the past 2 weeks. The delegates watched in silence as the images played. They saw Jaiwin staying up all night with Rika, her hand on the dragon's scales, speaking softly to comfort her. They saw Huna crying tears of joy when the dragon survived the infection. They saw Miho working tirelessly, researching dragon biology for days without rest. They saw a small team of humans fighting impossible odds with nothing but determination and love. Tajin spoke quietly. "This is what humanity is," he said. "We are not the most advanced species. We do not have the strongest military. We do not have the greatest technology. But we have this, the ability to see a suffering creature, and simply cannot look away. The refusal to give up on a life, even when doing so would be easier, even when doing so might cost us everything." He looked directly at Velker's hologram. "You sent Rika to us expecting her to die. You wanted to use her death as proof that we are unworthy. But she lived. She lived because we cared enough to try when you had already given up. And now you want to take her back, not because you care about her well-being, but because your pride cannot accept that we succeeded where you failed." The council chamber erupted in debate. Some delegates were moved by Tajin's words. Others remained unconvinced. Elder Nira watched it all with ancient eyes. She had seen countless debates over thousands of years, but this one felt different. Something important was happening here, something that could change the galaxy. While the council debated, tensions on Earth reached a breaking point. Velker's deadline was approaching. Only hours remained. The fleet's weapons began powering up, a clear warning. Evacuation started in Seoul and surrounding cities, but there was not enough time. Millions would be trapped if Velker ordered an attack. Rika sensed a growing danger through her telepathic abilities. She could feel the fear emanating from the humans around her. She could sense the warships overhead, their weapons charging. She made a decision. Despite her incomplete healing, despite the risk, she would address the council herself. She would speak for the humans who would save her life. Miho rigged together a device to amplify Rika's telepathic abilities. It was crude but functional. When activated, it would broadcast her thoughts to every ship in the fleet and every delegate in the council. Jaiwin was worried. Using telepathy in this way would be exhausting for Rika. It could set back her recovery. But the dragon insisted. This needed to be done. Rika closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. The amplifier hummed to life. Across the galaxy, beings suddenly heard a voice in their heads. It was clear and strong, filled with dignity and purpose. It was the voice of a dragon who had survived the impossible. She spoke of the Empire's cruelty. She spoke of Jaiwin's mercy. She told them what she had learned from humanity. She described the difference between worship and care, between reverence and love. The Valthorn people called dragons sacred, but they did not truly value dragon lives. The humans did not worship her, but they valued her in a way her own people never had. Then Rika made her position clear. She declared that she chose to remain on Earth until her healing was complete, not because she was being held prisoner, not because she had been manipulated, but because she trusted these humans with her life in a way she had never trusted her own people. They had proven their worth through actions, not words. Her final words echoed across the stars. The humans ask nothing of me. No worship, no service, no reverence. They simply want me to heal. They want me to fly again. Perhaps that is what the galaxy has forgotten. The strongest civilizations are not those that demand the most, but those that give the most freely. The strongest power is not in weapons or threats, but in mercy and compassion. The broadcast ended. Rika sagged with exhaustion. Jaiwin caught her, supporting the dragon's head gently. You did well, Jaiwin whispered. Rest now. But there was no time to rest, because King Velker, enraged beyond reason, was about to make his final move. Velker stood in his throne room, trembling with fury. He had been humiliated. His lies had been exposed. His carefully constructed image of power and wisdom had crumbled. The galaxy had heard the truth from the dragon's own mind. There was no way to deny it now, no way to spin it in his favor. He had lost the political battle, but he still had his fleet. He still had weapons. If he could not win through politics, he would win through force. He would make an example of Earth. He would show the galaxy what happened to those who defied the Valthorn Empire. His pride demanded blood. Velker gave the order. The fleet was afire on Sol. They would destroy the entire city unless Rika would surrender within 1 hour. It was madness. It was genocide. But he was beyond caring. His wounded pride was all that mattered now. He would have his revenge, even if it meant becoming a monster in the eyes of the entire galaxy. The order went out to the fleet, weapons powered to full capacity. Targeting systems locked onto the city. On Earth, alarms blared. People ran to the streets in panic. There was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. The evacuation had not been completed. Millions were still in the city. In the clinic, Jaiwin held Rika close. She whispered that she was sorry. So sorry. She had tried her best, but it was not enough. The dragon's telepathic voice was calm and warm. You gave me something worth more than my life. You gave me hope. You showed me what kindness truly means. I will be forever grateful. The world held its breath. The galaxy watched in horror. The fleet's weapons reached critical charge. In moments, they would fire. Sol would be destroyed. Millions would die. All because one king could not accept being wrong. All because cruelty and pride had triumphed over mercy and compassion. And then, in that moment of ultimate darkness, something impossible happened. Something that would change the galaxy forever. The fleet's weapons powered down. Not on one ship, on all of them. Every warship in the Valthorn fleet refused the order to fire. The weapons powered down. One by one, ship after ship in the Valthorn fleet refused to fire. Captains who had served the Empire for centuries made their choice. They had heard Rika's testimony. They had seen the footage from the clinic. They had listened to Commander Thrane's words echoing through their vessels. And they could not do it. They would not commit genocide in the name of one king's wounded pride. The mutiny was not violent. There were no battles between ships. No soldiers fighting soldiers. It was simply a quiet, unified refusal. Ship captains sent messages to King Velker. The messages were respectful but firm. We swore to protect the Empire, they said. We did not swear to destroy those who show us what we have forgotten. We will not fire on Earth. On the flagship, Velker stood alone in his throne room. His court had fled. His guards looked at him with uncertainty. His absolute power had evaporated in an instant. His own people had chosen compassion over cruelty. They had chosen mercy over vengeance. They had chosen the example set by humans over the orders of their king. Velker realized with growing horror that his 300-year reign was over. He had ruled through fear and power. But fear only worked when people believed he would follow through on threats. His fleet had called his bluff. They had seen through his cruelty to the weakness beneath. A true leader inspired loyalty. He had only commanded obedience. And obedience without loyalty was fragile. In the Galactic Council chambers, Elder Nera watched the mutiny unfold. A slow smile spread across her ancient face. She had waited thousands of years to witness something like this. A civilization choosing to evolve, choosing to become better. She called for an immediate vote. Elder Nera proposed that humanity be granted full council membership with all rights and protections. No more provisional status. No more being treated as lesser. Earth had proven itself in the most important way possible, not through military might or technological advancement, but through moral courage. The vote began. Species after species voted in favor. Even those who had sided with Velker earlier changed their position. They had witnessed the mutiny. They had heard Rika's words. They could not deny what Earth had accomplished. The final count was unanimous. Every single member of the Galactic Council voted to accept humanity as full members. But Elder Nera was not finished. She made another proposal. Earth should be recognized as a world of sanctuary, a place where any being, regardless of species or origin, could seek refuge and healing, a place where compassion was not just practiced but guaranteed. The vote on this measure was also unanimous. Then came the final matter. King Velker was formally censured by the council. His lies had been exposed. His negligence had nearly killed a sacred dragon. His attempted genocide had horrified the galaxy. He was removed from power immediately. The Valthorn Empire would need new leadership. Leadership that remembered what honor truly meant. The new Valthorn government moved quickly. Their first act was to release Commander Thrain from confinement and restore his rank. More than that, they honored him as a hero. He had spoken truth to power when everyone else remained silent. He had chosen conscience over obedience. The Empire would need leaders like him to guide their reformation. On Earth, the news spread like wildfire. The threat was over. The fleet was standing down. Humanity had been accepted as full members of the Galactic Council. Sol would not be destroyed. People poured into the streets, not in panic this time, but in celebration. They cheered and cried and hugged strangers. They had survived. In the clinic, Jaiwin collapsed to her knees with relief. Miho and Huna embraced, both crying. Rika's telepathic voice filled their minds, warm with gratitude and joy. You did it. You saved more than just my life. You saved your world. You showed the galaxy what humanity truly is. Jaiwin touched the dragon's scales gently. We all did it together, she whispered. 2 weeks passed. Rika's healing progressed steadily. The crisis was over, so Jaiwin could take the time needed to do things right. Every day, the dragon grew stronger. The membrane on her wings filled in completely. The bones knitted together properly. Color returned to her scales. Her eyes became bright and alert. She was becoming whole again. Finally, the day came. Jaiwin examined Rika's wings carefully. She tested the membrane strength. She checked the bone alignment. She ran every diagnostic test she could think of. Everything looked good. The wings were healed. Not perfect. They bore scars that would never fully fade, but they were strong. Strong enough to carry a dragon into the sky. A ceremony was arranged. Representatives from across the galaxy came to witness Rika's first flight since the accident. The area outside the clinic was transformed into a gathering place. Beings of every species stood together, waiting. News drones hovered overhead. This moment would be broadcast to every world in the galaxy. Jaiwin stood with Miho and Huna. Ambassador Teijin stood beside them, no longer weary but proud. He wore the formal robes that marked Earth's new status in the Galactic Council. Commander Thrain was there too, his uniform once again decorated with medals. But his expression was different now, softer. He had learned something from these humans, something he would carry for the rest of his life. Rika walked slowly into the open space. She moved carefully, testing her strength. The crowd fell silent. The dragon stretched her wings wide. They spread out beautifully, catching the sunlight. The iridescent scales shimmered in blues and purples. The scars were visible, but they did not diminish her beauty. If anything, they added to it. They told a story of survival and healing. Rika looked at Jaiwin. Their eyes met. Through their telepathic bond, the dragon shared her feelings. Gratitude deeper than words. Love that transcended species. A promise to never forget what had been done for her. Jaiwin felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. Go on, she thought back. Fly. Be free. Rika beat her wings once, testing them. Twice. 3 times. and then she lifted off the ground. She rose into the air, slowly at first, then with growing confidence. She climbed higher and higher, circling over the crowd. Her flight was not perfect. There was a slight hitch in her wing beats where the scars pulled, but she was flying, really flying. The crowd erupted in cheers. Humans and aliens alike celebrated this moment. Jaiwan watched through her tears, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. Miho put his arm around her shoulders. Hyuna was sobbing openly, but with joy. They had done it. Against all odds, against all expectations, they had saved her. And not just saved her life, but given her back her sky. Rika flew for an hour, soaring and diving and reveling in the freedom of flight. Finally, she descended gracefully and landed beside Jaiwan. The dragon lowered her head, and Jaiwan pressed her forehead against Rika's scales. No words were needed. The bond between them said everything. Then Rika made an announcement that surprised everyone. Through her telepathic abilities, she broadcast her decision to the assembled crowd. She would stay on Earth, not as a patient, but as an ambassador. She would help build bridges between humanity and the dragons of her world. She would teach both species what she had learned, that strength and compassion were not opposites, but partners. The weeks that followed brought great changes. Jaiwan's clinic became something more. It was transformed into Earth's first interspecies medical center, a place where human techniques and galactic knowledge merged to create something new, a place where any being could come for healing, regardless of their ability to pay or their political status. Miho became the head of the research division. He studied alien biology and developed new treatments. His work was groundbreaking, combining Earth's natural healing methods with advanced galactic medicine. Hyuna trained a new generation of xenoveterinarians. Young people came from all over Earth to learn from her, to be part of this amazing new field. Jaiwan continued to do what she had always done. She cared for every patient with the same dedication, whether they were a stray cat or an alien diplomat. Her reputation spread across the galaxy. Beings from hundreds of worlds came seeking treatment. They came seeking the miracles performed in Seoul. But more than that, they came seeking hope. They came seeking mercy. Earth became known not for its weapons or its wealth, but for its willingness to heal. The planet was recognized as a beacon of compassion in the galaxy. When beings were sick and afraid, when they had nowhere else to turn, they came to Earth, and they were welcomed, always welcomed. Former King Velker lived in exile. He was stripped of power and title, living alone on a remote world. Some said he was bitter. Others claimed they had seen him watching recordings of Rika's flight. His expression, they said, might have been regret, but whether he learned his lesson or not had become irrelevant. The galaxy had moved on, embracing a new truth. 6 months after Rika's arrival, Jaiwan stood in her clinic late at night. She was finishing paperwork for her latest patient, a young alien suffering from a rare genetic disorder. The treatment would be long and difficult, but Jaiwan was already planning her approach. She would not give up. She never gave up. Rika landed silently in the courtyard outside. The dragon had become a fixture in Seoul. Children brought her offerings of fruit. Adults greeted her with respect and affection. She was no longer worshipped as a distant sacred being. She was loved as a friend, a teacher, a symbol of what was possible when different species chose to care for each other. Through their bond, Rika shared a thought with Jaiwan. You know what you started, do you not? This is not just about one dragon anymore. You have shown the galaxy what humanity is. You have changed everything. Jaiwan smiled, tired but content. I just did what anyone would do, she thought back. Rika's response was warm with affection. No, you did what no one else would do. You showed mercy when the galaxy expected cruelty. You gave hope when everyone believed in despair. You refused to give up when giving up would have been easier. That is not just anyone. That is humanity. That is what makes your species special. As Jaiwan turned off the lights and headed home, she passed a new sign being installed at the clinic's entrance. It read Earth Interspecies Medical Center, where every life matters. Above it, Rika soared into the night sky. Her scales caught the moonlight, shimmering in beautiful patterns. She was a living testament to the power of compassion. a reminder that mercy was not weakness, but the greatest strength of all. King Velker's dark joke had become humanity's greatest triumph. In trying to prove them weak, he had revealed their greatest strength. In seeking to humiliate them, he had elevated them to heroes. He had sent them a dying dragon as a test of their inadequacy. Instead, they had shown the galaxy what true civilization looked like. The Valthorn Empire began a long process of reformation. They studied Earth's example. They learned to balance strength with kindness, power with mercy. Commander Thrain helped lead this change, never forgetting what he had witnessed in a small clinic in Seoul, never forgetting the lesson taught by a veterinarian who simply refused to give up. Other civilizations began to change too. They saw what Earth had accomplished. They saw how compassion had defeated cruelty. They saw how mercy had triumphed over vengeance. Slowly but surely, the galaxy began to evolve. Wars became less common. Cooperation increased. Species that had been enemies for centuries began to talk, to understand each other, to find common ground. And it all started in a small veterinary clinic. It started with one woman who saw a suffering creature and could not look away. It started with a promise whispered to a dying dragon, a promise that was kept against impossible odds, a promise that changed the universe. Somewhere in the darkness of space, the galaxy watched and learned. They learned that mercy was not a weakness to be exploited. They learned that compassion was not foolishness to be mocked. They learned that the measure of a civilization was not in its weapons or technology, but in how it treated those who were vulnerable and in need of help. And in Seoul, in a clinic that had become a symbol of hope for the entire galaxy, Jaiwin slept peacefully. Tomorrow would bring new patients, new challenges, new lives to save. But tonight, she could rest. She had kept her promise. She had saved Rika. And in doing so, she had shown the universe what humanity truly was. Not warriors, not conquerors, but healers. Compassionate, stubborn, refusing to give up. The kind of people who saw the impossible and tried anyway. The kind of people the galaxy desperately needed.